You got some great posters in the background. All your work, I think, right? Yeah.
Yeah, all well, some of
Oh,
it.
that's awesome. Oh, very
So this
cool.
is. I'm just at home, so I've just got It's basically. This is a
Very
great
cool.
poster. You'll like this one. This is this is the French poster for Rendition. You see that?
Hold on, your hands in the way, your fingers in the
Oh,
way. Let me see. Oh,
sorry.
that's nice. Yeah, yeah, really nice. Gyllenhaal
It's
in the
cool.
top right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
very
with
cool.
Gyllenhaal with the spoon, and it's
Ooh,
called
I like it.
Detentions Secret. Yeah.
Oh, very
Um,
nice. Now, where is home for you, Paul? Is it are you in Africa, or is that just where you
I
grew up?
am. I'm just outside of Durban in South Africa. Yeah.
How great is that? How important is Africa to you, Paul?
Um, well, having lived in Europe and having lived in the States for as long as I did, I kind of realized that, it's such a cliche, but it kind of is home. Like the people you understand. They understand your sense of humor and the
Right,
sport and the
right.
food, and you know what I mean. You don't have to explain yourself to everybody that you kind of meet. So from that point of view,
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
feels like home. I left the States to be closer to my parents when they were getting a little older, you know?
Yes,
Mm.
absolutely, absolutely. So Zimbabwe is where you were born, raised in South Africa. Is that where you are right now? South Africa?
I'm in South Africa, yeah. So I was in Zimbabwe till I was 11, 12 years old. And then I
Yeah.
was at South Africa for basically the last year of junior school. And then I went to high school and I did university. And then I had compulsory national service. I had to be in the army back in the apartheid days. So I
Yeah,
was in an
yeah.
army band. And
Wow.
yes, which was actually, yeah, it's interesting. All these little threads came together to kind of help kind of mold myself as a musician. And I was in the band, I was with a lot of jazz, like really famous, great South African jazz musicians, and some of them were internationally famous too.
Yeah.
Um, so I was getting to learn. Yeah, I was a classical pianist basically until then. So this exposed me to, kind of another side of music and big band and arranging, and I was playing the clarinet and stuff in the band. So yeah, it just all kind of helped kind of
Can you
mold.
can you pick stuff up there, Paul, to use as a composer? Can you pick stuff up as being in a vocal band, being in a band, using obviously the instruments parts helps, but did you feel like that the beginnings you're talking about, played into you being a composer?
Yeah, I think it all added up. So I did the army band. While I was at university, I played in a bunch of cover bands. So because during apartheid, there were sanctions. There wasn't a lot of support of local musicians. So I would
Right.
have loved to have been like Elton John or Billy Joel or something like that. But kind of, you know, it was easier for record companies to just, bring in a million Michael Jackson LPs and sell those than actually spend money on on South African artists. So I played in bands, doing cover bands, which is great because then you have to take the song apart and rearrange it for the group that you got and figure out the synth lines and the bass lines and the strings and the programming and all that stuff. So I did that, and in the army I got more into big band and kind of jazz stuff. Then I was a musical director in theatre shows like Rocky Horror,
Yeah.
Joseph, Broadway shows. So actually on stage as the musical director and kind of working with drama real time.
Yeah.
We put together a few shows of before they were kind of popular, which they are now. Back then, also because of apartheid, we used to have to do show. We weren't allowed to do like a full Andrew Lloyd Webber or a full Cameron McIntosh. So we had these little compilation shows, like the best of Andrew Lloyd Webber and that kind of thing. And then we also started doing the same with like Elton John and Billy Joel and Cole Porter. And so we put together these compilations long before like Red Hot and Blue and those kind of things became popular because we had
Right.
to.
Right. Right.
So that was also, kind of added into the mix, doing the live drama. Um,
It's kind of amazing, Paul, when you see how apartheid. Obviously, I know how it affected people, but even like the ripple effects of its extensions of how just I don't know what word you would use, but it was just so
Ramifications, yeah,
yes, the ripple effect went pretty far. I think
yeah,
you know.
definitely did.
Yeah. So you mentioned your tremendous background. You have this eclectic background. let me ask you this, not an easy question, but when it comes to influences, right? Give me one that is a band vocal person, and give me one that is a composer that does just kind of movies. One of each. It doesn't have to be the person, like just maybe one of.
Okay, well, just off the top of my head, Joni Mitchell is like,
Good
I'm a
one.
huge fan of her. So I'm a massive fan of Joni's. And then composer-wise, obviously coming from the classical side of things, but classical composers, but I'd say the first film score that really kind of hit me was Blade Runner.
Good one. Yeah.
Like when I listened to that, because I came from a kind of eclectic pop background, and because he had the Demis Roussos vocals, and if you think of Tsotsi and you think of like, how we used Vusi Mahlasela's voice in that, it's kind of influenced a little bit by that Tales of the Hidden City or whatever the track is from Blade Runner.
Right.
With Demis Roussos going,
Yeah.
that trippy, like, what the hell is that? And it was funny because for the longest time you couldn't get the original recording. Remember, it wasn't releasable. So
for a lot of those great scores, it was like impossible to land one to listen to on your own. It was, and Blade Runner was certainly in that mix.
I think that the only version that was released was by like the something new Hollywood Orchestra or something. It was, they took the score and re-recorded the whole thing. But
it wasn't the actual
same.
It was the re-recording. Yes.
It's
funny that you
remember
mentioned that. Yes, I was listening to something that they did the same on a much different level. Karate Kid had the same thing. Bill Conti had a great score,
right?
But somebody re-recorded it, and it's like, wait, this wasn't the music.
So they sophisticated it up, and they had great musicians on this Blade Runner recording. But like that love scene there, it was like. Sounded like one of the GRP, like David Sanborn or something. I think it probably was him. But the original sounded more like a kazoo. You know what I mean? On the actual score, it was like, so although it was cleaned up and everything, when I finally got when they finally released the actual score, the Vangelis tracks, it was so nice just to hear everything kind of gritty. I mean, he's amazing too. Have you watched those videos of him composing live on those machines that he's...
I haven't. I don't think I've seen those. No, is it?
Okay, so Vangelis with MIDI and samples and stuff in his studio, he's got like a 3 or 4 tier keyboards where each 6 or 7 notes or maybe a couple of octaves, including the feet and pedal switches and volume, are all like the orchestra. And he sits there and he goes, like performing this thing live. It's honestly like it's just mind blowing because he probably like busked the score for Blade Runner in like real time. He's that good on his system. You should look up there's videos of him performing his music live on this system that he designed in his studio. It's incredible.
Just what would I really want to see that. So what do I Google? Just his.
I'll send you a link. I'll find it and send you a link.
Yeah.
But, just get your WhatsApp.
Joni Mitchell is a great choice too. She did a song for there was a show, Ricky Gervais, Afterlife. So what's that song she sings? Something Now. It's a really popular
Both Sides
song.
Now? Both Sides
Oh,
Now?
yes. The way they use that song, I'm going to tell you, Paul, like the way they use it, I had my head in my hand. My eyes were like, oh my God. Oh, good Lord. Oh my God.
The amazing thing about that is the original recording of that, I think it's off of Blue. And she's singing it as like this wisp of a 20-year-old, Canadian blonde hippie. Yeah. And there's a version that she recorded in maybe the 90s. I think Brian Blade did the arrangements and stuff. Or no, not Nelson Riddle. One of those. What's the guy's name? Anyway, so super famous orchestra. I think recorded at Capitol with the songs and incredible arrangements. And she does Both Sides Now like 2 octaves lower. So she goes, like her voice is like it is now. She's just done another album. But the comparison of those 2 songs, which, like the versions of it, one is this high, wispy kind of fluty voice, and then the other one is this just low, sonorous, kind of rich, life-heavy kind of she's amazing. She just did a Newport thing with Brandy Carlisle.
Oh, okay.
The album came out 2 days ago. you need to listen to that because she sounds she sounds like a man now. But like, you know, when you hear her voice, it's just because she had a stroke, she couldn't sing or talk for ages, and she did these jam sessions with Brandy at home. Mumford and Sons and all these people came and jammed with her, and they convinced her to do these live recordings. It's amazing.
How does she sounds different than she did years ago, but she still sounds really good. Yeah.
She's just Joni's phrasing, you know, like the voices, the notes that she uses, and she's just a hero of mine. Actually, I got to see her live in a recording at the Warner Brothers stage. It's a concert that's actually available. It's called Painting with Words and Music, and they had all of her paintings hanging up in the space. It was just being filmed for her friends, like 40 people sitting on couches, you know, around the stage, very intimate. Yeah. And I managed to score a nod from the transportation manager at Warner Brothers because my girlfriend used to give him chair massages at Whole Foods or something. Right. And he was like, "What are you doing tonight?" And she was like, "Nothing." He's like, "Do you like Joni Mitchell?" She's like, "I love Joni Mitchell." He's like, "Well, she's recording a concert just for her friends tonight." And I think he was trying to hit on her. And she said, "Well, my boyfriend's a huge Joni Mitchell fan. He's going to have to come along." And the guy was like, "Okay, I'll leave the 2 tickets." So we scored this like amazing concert. It was incredible. Like that must have been 2000, 1998, 99, somewhere around there.
You know what's unbelievable, Paul, is when you look at music. So in this case, like Joni Mitchell, like I knew she was great, but like when I watched her music being used in a show I love, it like magnified her effect. And it's funny how music, like the context of outside of the music fans who love the music to begin with, but when you put it in the context of an emotional story, how much it adds to that powerful song already. It's just that's one of the great things about music. You know, Paul.
Absolutely, I agree. So. I'm friends with Thomas Golubich. He does the music supervision for Breaking Bad and all of those shows.
Yeah,
and just so many great TV shows now, like Afterlife, where the music supervisors are taking these songs that in a kind of Tarantino way. You know, Tarantino did it for a long time, and I think his movies were so effective because he knew all these like alternative old tracks. You know, if you think of Pulp Fiction, the tracks that he introduced, you know, in those movies, they weren't, you know, like common knowledge, but he made them. And Kill Bill, I mean, like all this weird surf guitar.
That's a great call. That's a great point. Yeah.
So he was doing that like 20, 30 years ago, but now all the TV shows have got like amazing music supervisors that are picking, you know, whether it's you know, like a song for the end credits, or like Ricky Gervais, who's also a big music lover, picking out songs that he loves, Cat Stevens or Joni Mitchell, or you know, and placing them perfectly in a piece of movie or film. It's amazing.
Did you get a chance to finish Afterlife by any chance?
I did.
I did. So when he uses that and like his wife kind of disappears, like, I mean, I'm done gushing over it, but like it's just like. Like my wife thought I was going insane. Like I just sat there in my head and I was like just bawling and sobbing. Like, oh my God, that's the power of cinema and television.
Exactly, and even music that you don't necessarily like. So I got into Yellowstone, you know, and I'm not a country music guy, you know, but there's scenes from that with the music that they've chosen of like obviously like you know more country flavored music that I wouldn't listen to. Up against like Kip and Beth or whatever it is. What's his name? And I'm just, you know, just drizzing, you know. It's amazing. So my Shazam playlist, because I have Shazam on my watch. So whenever a TV show comes up and something I like, I just hit Shazam and it identifies it and it buzzes me. It's got it. So then I'm like, forget about it. Yeah, and then when I go to my iTunes or whatever on my computer, I just open up my Shazam playlist and I play that. And there may be like 40 or 50 tracks that I've listened to once and fallen in love with from a show, you know. And then it opens up a whole wormhole of new artists and stuff. It's amazing.
My Shazam playlist is a woods running music, and you are on that. But before I get to that, you mentioned Quentin Tarantino. You know who else has a really solid appreciation for music? Is James Gunn in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I feel like
that mixtape attitude.
Yeah. It's like he just he uses them in the right context. Because sometimes you watch movies, it's like the song is kind of awkward with the scene that's going on. It doesn't really blend well. Gunn's got that down really well, just like Tarantino does.
Yeah.
You know,
the music is so powerful, and if I wasn't a composer, I would love to be a music supervisor.
Yeah.
Honestly, what a great job, just finding the best tracks, unknown tracks, and giving options. Also it's so quick. You can like throw a track up against the scene immediately and it's going to hit different places that, just make it work.
It seems overwhelming, Paul. That seems like an overwhelming job, like with the amount of songs that are out there, like to find the right song for a right scene. Seems like overwhelming. I mean, your musical knowledge is much more elaborate.
I don't know about that. It sounds to me like you've got.
But it's like that's a hard job, I would think. Then you have to worry about, okay, it's by this artist who's going to want a lot of money for us to use this. Like finances become a part of that too, right? Because if it's something by the Rolling Stones, so it's like you have to stay within budget depending on the song you use, and right.
But being able to replace like a Marvin Gaye track where they want $1 million for it, and you find some lesser known recording by some like a soul singer from those days. And like just to be able to go to the director, like, here, listen to this, Marvin's brilliant, but like there's so many of these songs, who else has amazing sound and a good ear for music is a Spanish director, works with Penelope Cruz and stuff all the time. I've just gone.
Del Toro?
Not Del Toro. The guy who did
I'll figure it out if we keep talking. I'll figure it out.
Anyway, so he did Viva la Tristeza. He has an album which was an accompanying album from one of the soundtracks that he did.
Okay.
And it's just sad songs that influenced him while he was making the movie.
Yeah.
And on there, I think there's a version of Nothing Compares to You done by another artist, not Sinead O'Connor, just to be relevant, for now. But there's some songs on that. What's his name? Almodovar. So Pedro Almodovar. Yeah. So if you look up here, he's got a thing called Viva la Tristeza, which is, long live sadness, I guess, long live grief or whatever.
Yeah.
Melancholy. And there's like 20 tracks on there by artists I've never heard before. And each one of them just is mind blowing,
Yeah. There's a movie it was Sean Penn and Jack Nicholson. I can't remember what it's called. I'll think of it. But
Crossing Guard?
Not Crossing Guard. I'll get it. It's Nicholson. Oh shit! I will. I'm going to find it. But he plays a detective that's trying to investigate a missing girl. And there's a song that comes on the beginning. It's called Orchestra to Something. And it's one of the most powerful songs I ever heard. Like if it had been for movies, it never would have hit me. But I'll figure out the movie because it's one of my favorites, and I have so much in my head right now. Yeah. So the one thing I wanted to ask you was when it comes to AI, right? So I was watching something the other day where AI created their own, like not related to the creators. They created their own episode of South Park. AI just did it. Like it took, they
wrote the script and everything.
Yeah, it did everything. Like the story, the script, how they use the characters. That was all. The Pledge was the movie, by the way. It's called The Pledge.
The Pledge. That's what a great movie.
But the AI did this, and it's like, oh my god, like, is this thing scarier than I really think it is? Like, are you worried about AI as a composer, as somebody who loves music? Is that going to present an issue from the musical side of things when it comes to movies, Paul? You think?
I think that's like something coming out of your blind spot, and it's probably going to knock us all off our feet. But I think musicians today are just struggling enough with the fact that music became free, like a commodity. Like 5 years ago, an album used to cost $10, but now you can get all the music ever written by anybody ever in the world in the universe for $10.
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen? You know what I mean? It's like, so I've seen the ramifications. Napster kind of was a little bit of a thing, and then people were like, oh, music should be free, and then the Metallica, and then copyright, and then all of that kind of stuff. And then suddenly, like the big tech companies just decided they're going to slip in this, this idea of you can stream everything, you can just subscribe. It's like, no, how did that work? I mean, iTunes was good. At least it was 99 cents a song. The artist got 6 cents and everybody else got the rest,
Yeah.
But it was something. 6 cents is better than 0.000 something, on Spotify or YouTube, all of them, Tidal. Just the algorithms are so rigged, like they literally, like I read this somewhere, maybe a year or so ago, maybe through David Byrne or somebody brought it up. But they checked out on the algorithms that on Spotify, if people listen to a song, they generally listen to the intro, the first verse, and the chorus, second verse and the chorus, but generally by the end of the second chorus, they're ready to flip on because they don't want to hear the solo and the blah, blah, the play out and all that stuff. And that's around 1 minute 43, right? So Spotify set the marker at like 150. We'll pay for a stream that's only 150 and above because otherwise it's accidental. They didn't listen to the whole song. Maybe it wasn't the song they were looking for. You know what I mean? So even though they pay so little, they also don't pay. They have the argument.
That is so cheesy. That is so cheesy,
isn't it? But they're $1 billion, $1 trillion tech company, and like little old me. I don't know. Anyway, so the AI thing, yeah, I mean, like this voice swapping, like you can write a song with John Lennon's voice. Drake, this artist Grimes, I think, has offered her voice up. She's like, use my voice for free. It's just generated. So they've sampled her voice and now they can sing like her. And she said, you can use my voice on any pop track to split it 50-50 with me. Go ahead, knock yourself out.
That is insane. And it explains, Paul, why people are selling off their music catalog. So at least they get something for their money versus nothing for their money. All these legends are selling off their catalogs, right? Now I kind of get maybe why.
Well, that's kind of what happened. That's been how to make money in the last 15 years, because that's exactly how Spotify and Apple Music and Tidal, all that works, is they got the big guys to sell their catalogs, to allow them to release Billy Joel or Elton John or whatever. And they paid those guys millions, right? And then once that happened, they got the subscription. Like all the other little artists are like, well, I better be on the platform. I'm not getting paid for it. I'm just going to get my streaming rights. But they paid those guys in advance to do it. And Taylor Swift took a stand against it. She was like, screw you, buddy. I can see what you're doing. I'm not going to be a part of that, And I think she held out for a while, but she's probably on it now. But so the AI thing, what scares me is not so much the tall standing stalks or whatever you want to call them, like the top people that would get replaced by AI generative figures or characters or voices, whatever. It's all the extra work and the everyday people that are just grinding out a living.
That's true. I never thought of that.
Because the AI can generate crowds and dwarves for like Lord of the Rings or whatever. So like the actual dwarves can't get hired anymore because, they had a special job and they were paid for that. But now computers are doing all that background, armies, fight scenes, huge crowds, all of that kind of stuff. So those guys are being cut out, and they were the ones who were struggling, let's face it, anyway, because they were just gig workers,
Right.
So, and the same with animation and stuff. I mean, the South Park thing blows my mind. But if you think of everybody that used to do coloring and rotoscoping and onion layering and all that kind of stuff, paying minimum wage, but to do like these time-intensive jobs now, I mean, AI can just do it in its sleep, So those guys have also lost jobs. So it's if you're floating on the boat and looking around and going like, well, AI is not going to replace the truly creative, top of the. But if you just put your head underneath the water and you look at all the people that have drowned,
that's a great way of saying it. Yeah. And you know what they said about that South Park episode is that it was really, really good. That's what's scary. The fact that it wasn't like it was cheesy or hacky or you couldn't really understand it.
Right.
It was supposedly it's really, really good.
Is it not? It's not around. It's not available. Or?
I just saw a clip of a guy who's talking about AI, and I haven't looked for it, but I mean now I'm curious to the point where I think I might. But like he's the way he was talking about it, he said it was as funny as the original work itself. So it's like, I mean, it wonders. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. So South Park is it's like also just funny part of my story. So when I first moved to the States, I was in San Francisco. My girlfriend at the time lived there, and I hadn't moved down to LA yet. And we'd gone out one night, and she was sharing a flat with I think her name was Caitlin. She worked for an animation company or production company in LA, and it was just around Christmas. In fact, I think it was just before. No, maybe it was August. Lady Di. I arrived home, and she'd been killed in the tunnel, and that news had just hit. And on the same day, the next day at breakfast, Caitlin had a little laptop and she had a little tiny 320 by 240 like video of the original South Park, the Christmas Brian Boitano and Jesus episode before they'd been picked up. So it was just the little Christmas card that they'd made, the little kind of show that they'd made. And she was showing me this, and I was laughing my head off. And then, 4 or 5 months later, it became South Park.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny.
Wow.
Just being in those little those moments.
Yeah,
that's so vivid.
That is
kill Jesus.
And really, it's just something that I do worry about moving forward. But I did want to talk about. You have many wonderful entries in your filmography. I did want to talk about Eye in the Sky. Two people I wanted to ask you about. I feel like have you worked with Gavin Hood on multiple occasions?
Yeah. So most of his films, the only ones I didn't. Mark and I, the composer, we worked together on Gavin's films. We came really close to doing Wolverine just after Tsotsi and Rendition had happened. And so we had all the interviews and stuff with Fox and jumped through all the hoops and stuff to convince them that we could do a big tentpole kind of movie for the summer. And we managed to get a contract together, and the music department went up to the top of the Fox Towers, and they said, we've got the composer for Wolverine, and he looked at the name and he went, Paul, who else have you got?
Oh,
literally,
come on.
Literally, he was like, never heard of them. Who have you got? Who else have you got? And then I think that obviously had someone in the back pocket,
Wait a second. Wait a second. So that happens where they don't even bother listening to your work. They just look at the name.
The guy at the top goes, never heard of them. Who else do you got?
Oh my God. My God.
There was not even a conversation about listen, they just did Tsotsi, that won the best, foreign film Oscar, and Rendition was a great soundtrack, Warner Brothers, and big orchestra, and they can do it. Sounds amazing and fresh, whatever. All the things they were telling us, I think it was Alex Rothman is his name. Rothman was a guy at the time. And he said, Paul, I've never heard of him. Who else do you have? And I think that it was, can't even remember who they went with at the time, but he also hadn't done a blockbuster.
But that's unbelievable. I'm not going to say it's the same because your level is way here, but even in podcasting, when I reach out to guests, either publicists, many agents, many managers, they do not even listen to other interviews. They just look. I mean, I have a decent following on social media, but that's all they look at, or they'll look at they'll let somebody else make the decision for them. They won't actually do the work and listen to an interview themselves. In other words, they should have listened to your work before making that ridiculous decision. I mean, if they decided, hey, I've listened to Paul's work, I've listened to composer B, composer C, and I really like where Paul's going to bring this. So at least they could at least do their job and listen to an interview in my case, or in your case, listen to the work, let it process, do your effing job. That drives me nuts, Paul.
Yeah. I don't know if you're spending $150 million on a film, maybe you're not quite as ready to kind of just throw it into the unknown, as it were. I think,
but music is a big thing, right? So I mean, huge, Hans Zimmer. Yeah. So I can't remember his name. I know, and I should because he's on my playlist. But the Oppenheimer composer, I forget his name.
I haven't seen it yet. So
yeah. So he didn't go with Hans Zimmer, right? Because that's Nolan's kind of go-to guy in a lot of cases. Hans Zimmer's a guy he uses often, not all the time, but often.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just feel like if you're gonna, music is a huge part of any movie. If you're gonna go with somebody else, at least do somebody the service of listening to their work. That's just, I don't know. That's the difference between somebody who's mediocre to below average to somebody who is top notch in their field. That's I don't know.
I don't know. Sometimes the people that make the decisions are not necessarily the right creative people. You know what I mean? They're coming from a different angle. Just as an artist or a creator doesn't make sense. So. The publicists that you're talking about, they go, oh, he doesn't have 1 million followers, so we're not interested.
That's how it works. That's 100% how it works. Yeah. If they reached out, they give me answers without even, and not all of them, but just many of them are just do your job. If you find out that somebody's not right for you, do the legwork. Do your job. If I had to write a book, Paul, to composers, to actors, to directors, do your research into who you're paying money to. Like as far as managers and publicists and agents, make sure who you think you're paying is doing the legwork for you. Like,
Right.
because I'm going to tell you, there's times where I'm like, I'm going to reach out to this actor and tell him, save your money. My God. Like, I don't know, but that's neither here nor there. I have to say, talk about Mark Killian a little bit. He's the other guy I wanted to ask you about. Now, do you guys, is it professionally, how did you guys put together Eye in the Sky, and anything you wanted to say?
So Mark Killian and I have been friends for ages. He was at university in just down the road from me in Durban. He was doing a jazz degree with Darius Brubeck, who's Dave Brubeck's son. He was the teacher of that. So I was doing all those shows and stuff that I talked to you about, the theater shows, including like being Shirley Bassey's pianist when she was on tour.
Wow.
And it was quite a big tour, and Mark was wanted to go and study film music at USC, the Christopher Young course.
Right.
And he was trying to raise money for that and doing scholarship work and trying to get that. So I booked him on a couple of gigs as a keyboard player in the band. I got him to be a keyboard player on the Shirley Bassey tour, and so he used that money and he went off and studied USC and studied under Chris Young and was his assistant for a long time, and Daniel Licht.
Right.
And so when I moved to LA, I stayed with Mark. He'd said, "Come on over. You should be here. It's just a big pond. There's so much to do." So our friendship kind of had gone back to like the late 80s. In mid 90s, like 96, I moved to LA. Stayed with him for a bit, and then started, doing the same kind of thing, as working as an assistant ghostwriter for Dan Licht and doing piano reduction scores for Chris Young, and performing. In those days, it was all live, in front of the producers. So he'd call me in, and there'd be like 6 cues that he's trying to sell the producers of Hard Rain or whatever it is, and you'd sit there on the piano, maybe on your own or with another pianist, and play the score, and Chris would be going go 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 go. And singing the violins and trying to sell this cue in the days before, orchestra mock-ups and stuff. So Chris had been Chris's student, and so he started establishing himself. He'd just done one student film, and then Tsotsi came along, and I knew Gavin. He was writing it. He was still writing Tsotsi when I first met him, and I'd known his wife, it's now his ex-wife. I'd known her when she was younger. So like a mutual friend of us said, "Oh, Gavin and Janie are coming to town." And I was like, "Who's Gavin?" I knew who Janie was.
Right.
He walked in and I was like, "Oh, Janie. Oh, Gavin. Hi." Anyway, so he discovered, he was doing Tsotsi. It was about 7 years that I'd been in LA. I had a bit of an itch to kind of maybe go back home for a bit. And so I asked if I could be on that movie, but I didn't have any film credits. I'd been doing some TV work and ghostwriting and stuff. So we convinced the Polish producer, Peter Fudikowski, that if Mark came on board, because he'd done the USC thing, we'd do it together. He was also South African, and we came back to South Africa. We did the music editing and the music supervising on that gig, on Tsotsi, and the composing. So we were a good budget package,
Right.
And nobody knew that it would do as well as it did. Gavin literally sat us down and said, we'll be lucky if it gets into the Wonga Wonga, film festival in Australia or something. It's going to maybe show at the Lemley on Sunset, for like one weekend. Anyway, so it went to Edinburgh Film Festival and won the Critics' Prize and Audience Award, which is the first time I think in ages that one film won both the popular and the critic. And then obviously went on to a couple of others. Toronto was a big one, went and won that. So anyway, so Mark and I did that. And then when it lost the BAFTAs, which was a kick in the teeth, and then it lost the Golden Globes, which was a huge kick in the teeth. Yeah. And then came to the Oscars and we were like, oh, we're going to just, nothing, it's going to lose again and nobody's going to know us anyway, but it won. And so then we were kind of all joined at the hip. So Mark and I worked together on all of Gavin's films, except, as I said, Wolverine. And then Ender's Game was another one where the producers and stuff got involved. And
So quick question. I want to piggyback on what you said, but I just was thinking of something. So in the case of Wolverine, can a director like Gavin ever override and say, "Listen, no, I want to go with Paul," or is it kind of out of his hands?
What's he going to say? Like,
Yeah.
it's me and my composer or nothing. They go like, okay, Gavin,
Yeah, that makes sense.
help yourself. Don't
Yeah.
knock yourself out in this
Yeah, that's why I
revolving
think
door.
like if you hire a director, so like let the director use his or her vision to make that project, right? So that's what would drive me nuts if I was in this industry. Like, so you have this producer nitpicking here, you have this person picking, like, it's like, get out, like, this is my kitchen. Let me make this. Just get out. Let me
Yeah.
alone. I don't know. I wish
It's
it was
just
a
that
lot
you're making
simpler.
it with my money. So,
No,
I
I
feel
get it.
like
Yeah, they invest a lot of money into the project. I get it. They should have their say. I get it. I
you
just
think
wish
that
I wish things were simpler. So I get what you're saying. If people invest their money, they should have. Sometimes they want their say, and I get that. But I wish it was a lot. So in other words, I have a feeling like on a Christopher Nolan project, there's not many people telling him what to do. Right? I wish it was like
yeah.
that. I wish it was like that in a bigger scale. But I get it. Like if
I
somebody
think
invests.
it gets there. It gets to a point. So this is interesting because you probably touched on this with some of your other guests. Is with the composer director relationship is one that once because I don't want to make this a long answer, but like the director often can't play music, so it's one thing that generally they can't do. Like they may be actors, they're probably great photographers, they probably wrote the script, they do all of that other stuff, but music is like this completely unknown thing. So once you
Right.
find somebody that you can trust and work with that manages to express that part of the unexpressible for you, that relationship becomes so sacrosanct. It's like so that John Williams, Spielberg, all of those kind of those relationships.
Yeah.
So the composer director relationship is probably one that they like to hold on to and I think that's why you see so many partnerships, like you say, it's in the Nolan or Spielberg, Williams. Once you've found that trust and that bond, and the person says, "This is the guy who'll be my mouthpiece when it comes to music." I think there's the same thing that happens with directors once they get to a certain level, and producers.
Right.
So
Right.
then it's like, this guy's my producer. He's going to let me do what I do because he knows what I do well. It's when you get these other people involved with money that's not theirs. They're part of a company that's listed, or they've got 1 million investors. That's when it becomes more difficult. I think that kind of
Yeah, that makes sense.
committee.
Yep. We mentioned Ricky Gervais afterlife in the moment of Joni Mitchell. I feel like Eye in the Sky has the same kind of moment when we're at the end of the movie and She's Beautiful is playing. Oh my God! I mean, this movie came out in 2016. I remember people are gonna watch this and say, "Boy, he cries a lot." Like I was really emotional. Like I was in tears. Like this was like this poor thing goes through all this, and then that wonderful score comes in, and it's like I don't know. It's a really underrated movie, and it's a really underrated score.
Yeah, that movie did really well in Europe. I think it was the highest scoring movie in Rotten Tomatoes for 2016.
Wow.
At least maybe in .co.uk, or like the UK version of the site. And I think it was so impactful. I mean, working on that movie, like working on all of Gavin's films, like there's some moments where you're just sitting there and you're supposed to be working on this film, and it's just so heartbreaking. And Rendition is the same moment. We call it the green grandma queue, where the police chief comes running in and he sees this grandma mourning the death of her grandson.
Yeah. Rendition
and he
is a
realizes,
beautiful movie. Yeah.
And he realizes that his daughter's died too, like a week ago, and he's still running around trying to find her. But there's a cue there that just like, and it was the temp track, and that was a Sheila Chandra piece.
Wow. Okay.
And it was the one thing that we couldn't fix. We couldn't get it right, So it looked like we were at the mixing stage already, and we couldn't replace it. We hadn't written anything that was good enough,
Yeah.
And literally on the mixing stage, I think the night before, Mark and I got a friend of ours called Marissa to come in and sing, and it was just a drone. The Sheila Chandra thing had been just a drone and her going like one of these kind of Hindu chant things. But we got Marissa in, and she was singing this part that we'd given her, and then one of us said to her, "Do you think you could sound like an oud? Or, I mean, like some kind of like we played her some of the instruments, can you sing like this Arabic instrument, like, like one of these Shania or whatever they call it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
she's like, that's interesting. I could try that. And so we hit record. And basically she sang the melody that we'd given, but she sang it as if she was like a double reed instrument, like,
Wow.
And we just sang this, and Mark and I looked at each other. It was midnight in LA. Chris Beck, we had a studio that Mark shared with Chris Beck. And like we were like, yeah, this is it, So we went to the mixing stage, which I think was up at the Mount Olympus in LA at the top, one of these fancy studios. And we said, Megan, to the editor, Megan, just drop this in the green grandma queue. And she was like, we like that piece. I was like, yeah, no, but we think you'd like this. So we turned the lights down. It was Megan and Gavin, the director, and the sound guys, and obviously the sound effects people. They switched it down, called that piece up, and they just hit the piece of music for the first time. Our recording, they heard it with that thing, and they were all like,
wow.
Because they'd watched it 1,000 times,
Yeah.
And
that piece of music really magnified that scene.
Yeah, but Gavin makes these amazing, like he loves creating these spaces. He doesn't want like Tsotsi is amazing because people don't talk a lot in it. Like you just do, and the plot unfolds, and you see people just being. He did the same in Rendition. He ended up cutting so many lines from the script because like a good actor like Jake or whatever could say it just by looking and going. Like, what, you don't have to say, well, why did you do that? Like, what was going through? You just go,
right.
And you leave that, and it's like, what? And then there's space for the music because it's not like music, dialogue, you know what I mean? So it's
right.
Those kind of things. I think that his movies have got so many like amazing spaces for it. Like Eye in the Sky. Are you talking about the hula hooping section at the end?
Yes, at the end where she's dancing at the end. Yeah, it's right before the credits, and she's dancing, and the track "She's Beautiful" is playing, and it's like,
and she's in slow motion, just turning around for like a minute and a half.
And you've realized what's kind of happened before that, and the music it's just like, it's just so heartbreaking. Rendition is a phenomenal movie too. But it's just a quick question on that, Paul. So when it comes to like say a track like She's Beautiful, right? Wonderful track. So when you co-compose, do you each create a track? Do you each collaborate on each track? Like for example, She's Beautiful. Is that something that you created or Mark created or you both touched on? Like how's that work?
So we do everything together in one room.
Gotcha. Okay.
And we've also got kind of a Lennon McCartney pact that no matter who coming up with a theme or came up with a whatever, it's a co-composed situation.
Gotcha. Okay.
I might come up with like the main theme in the one movie, and Mark might come up with the main theme in another movie. But the great thing about it is because we know each other so well, and actually when we were doing these theater shows here, because he's also a pianist, but he was more jazz pianist and I was classical, we used to do these Keith Jarrett kind of improvisation jams in the on two pianos. So we're used to like improvising against each other, and it's great for me because Mark kind of liberates that left brain, right brain thing for me.
Right.
I've got a billion ideas that I need to get out, and he's happy to be the guy that records them and make sure that and he'll tweak the mics, and then he might take my recordings and edit them together.
Yeah. You mentioned something earlier about Gavin and his ability to like not use dialogue in certain scenes, right? And I feel like that plays a big part also in Eye in the Sky, right? Because when the two drone operators are at the end are just physically like sick with what they just did, like you could tell that they're overwhelmed. Like, I mean, I was reading something where like 30 or 40% of drone operators have PTSD. Like they didn't use a lot. They used no words. Like I think it was Gavin. Gavin was acting in that movie, I believe. I think he's talking to Aaron Paul, and I forget the other actor's name. And they don't say a word. You could just tell the look on their faces. They're sick to their stomach with what just happened. So, like, I guess that adds to your point of like Gavin's ability to know when dialogue should just like, let's just stop here. We don't have to overdo this, right? Yeah.
Yeah. When he approaches them as they step into daylight, and they've got this blinding, that they've been sucked into this lens, and Gavin comes up as the colonel, and I think he just says, "You should probably get some rest."
Yes. See you in 12 hours.
See you in 12 hours. Yeah.
Unbelievable. But
it's just that light.
Yeah,
That was an
yeah,
interesting cue, yeah, because we came out of that, and then the next cue starts really quickly after that. And I think it's the big, like a really big musical cue with Alan um,
Rickman.
Rickman,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And never tell a soldier what, like I've seen thousands of people blown up in front of me. Never tell a soldier what he. So it goes into that cue with the drone flying away after it's killed everybody and everything. So there's this weird transition from the one to the other, or maybe that's the end of that cue. But that was a fun cue to do. I love the
it's
ones where there's like multiple scenes and you just got to go from this one emotion to this other emotion to this other one, and
yeah.
kind of seamlessly. It's such a challenge, you know.
It's an awesome movie currently available on Amazon Prime if anybody wants to see
Oh,
it.
good.
Yeah, I mean, it's also Alan Rickman's last movie. I mean, iconic actor
Yeah.
like that. So it's a great movie for a variety of reasons, but that just adds to it. And if anybody hasn't seen it, I know they would love it. It's just it really puts a perspective on what is going on, and I love the way it's done. It's just a beautiful movie. Rendition too. I mean, you've done a lot of great things, Paul. Is there anything around the corner for you? Is there anything you wanted to get out there before I let you go? Is there anything you wanted to promote?
No, the movie that's coming up, not really allowed to talk about. So
Okay, I gotcha.
it's still in the pipeline. But yeah, I think COVID kind of screwed things up. We had a couple of movies lined up with Gavin, and we just, when you lose whoever it is, Matt Damon, then suddenly the movie doesn't have financing anymore. So COVID,
Yeah.
if we had him in August 2020, sorry, it's not like he's going to shift his schedule back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
I don't know, man.
yeah, a lot of movies I think died, in that kind of nightmare turnaround hell.
Yeah, you're super talented, and I really love your
Thank
work.
you.
Like, yeah, so I'm very
Thank you.
fortunate. Yeah, so I mean, a talent like yours. Let's hope moving forward, people actually listen to your music before making decisions on your future. I mean, it'd be nice because you are very, very talented, and I really
Thank you.
appreciate this time, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm so privileged to be on it. You've got some amazing guests, and I love the fact that you're talking about the mechanics and the emotions and the relationships of all of these different people that make films what they are, and every single part of it is vital.
Yeah.
Like the glory boys get all the attention, but
Yes.
it's the guys in the field, like doing the trench work that actually make it work. So, hats off to you for like digging deep and finding all of those, jewels, and
Thank you, Paul.
it's
One quick
amazing.
question before I let you go. Did you see All Quiet on the Western Front?
I did
So I had
the
vocal.
latest.
Yeah, the latest one. I
Yeah,
had Vocal Bertelman on, who won the Academy Award for that. He's a really grounded guy too.
amazing.
That's a really funky score, and a guy who decided to go for it. Like, that's like nothing. Like, you can't compare that to anything. Like that.
Yeah,
Like, it's like, whoa. Like, that's a
no,
that's a leap of faith right there, Paul.
it is crazy. I mean, Hans Zimmer occasionally comes up with things like that. The one with all the airplanes and the D-Day. What
Yes,
was that called?
and then people copy it. So
With
like
those shepherd tones.
yes, yes,
I like to feel like a lot of that was inspired because that came out just after Eye in the Sky. And on
yes,
Eye in the Sky, I worked with a bunch of iPad programmers and had this app that I'd found that was kind of working. And I worked with this guy, Christopher Carlson, on making it work for Eye in the Sky. So a lot of the sounds in Eye in the Sky I created on the iPad. And then
wow,
what we did is take what I'd written on the iPad and like manipulated real time audio into the computer. And we got an orchestrator to write out those iPad trippinesses for the orchestra. And so we recorded that in Europe, in Budapest. And we mixed the real live synths going with the iPad sound. So you got this like organic, electronic, granulated wildness. And there was a lot of pulsing, for the drones and the pixelation and eye in the sky. The idea of this eye that's watching you, but it's digital. So it's not perfectly analog. It's like these bitty kind of crushed noises.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we kind of gave that character that sound, and then we scored it with an orchestra, which is kind of like taking something backwards. Taking a bad photo and then painting the pixels.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that was really fun. And I felt like Hans Zimmer might have seen that and been inspired because Hans is amazing. What he does is incredible. He saw Rendition, and he went out of his way to send an email the next day to Mark and I saying, "Guys, the score for Rendition. I just watched Rendition in the theater last night. This is, just unsolicited. I got to tell you, that's the best world music score I've ever heard. In fact, nobody can claim to do a world music score until they've listened to Rendition. Please come around to my studio. I'd love to talk about collaborating and hang out and that kind of stuff. And I happened to be in South Africa, and Mark went across to Hans's place, and he was like, "Would you guys be interested in, doing like a class pedalt, or like one of those things, and come be part of the studio, and I'll feed you bits, and we could." But Mark and I were both like in our mid-30s at that stage, and I was like, I don't know if I can start again. And it would have probably been a very good career move, because the one thing Hans does is, like, when he has composers working on his films that he's working on, there's a moment when he goes to the director, okay, well, these last 6 cues that you really love, they were actually class pedals. He did all of them, so why don't you just work with him? So he does that. He's very good at like elevating people that have worked with him. And
I can't believe you didn't bring this up earlier. That's an awesome. He sent you a letter. That's a pretty impressive thing for him to do.
I sent it this email, and I was like, wow. And he didn't have to, like it's. You can probably see something and love it, and but I'm super proud of that score. I mean, we were in Morocco recording all those, because Mark and I, we also don't use any pre-made sounds or patches or sound libraries on our movies. It's kind of like it's a kind of a rule we've set ourselves. So we make all of our sounds from scratch, so we synthesize live recordings. And so it kind of, I think somebody picked up on that, and they were like, okay, this sounds like nothing else, because there is nothing else like it.
It's a great score. It's a great movie as well. And it's funny because for those listening that might not know, Hans Zimmer, I've joked with guests who've gone to it in the past. He has like I compare it to like Harry Potter School for Wizards, but he has a kind of the same thing for composers, right? It's like this kind of, it's not a school, but it's like what would you say? It's like a school, or how would you say it? It's like
it's a
factory complex where all these composers.
He's got all these levels of composers, like just going through, and he's in charge. He's the grand wizard, as it were, and he's kind of elevating. It's like a tide that floats all the boats. And you might start off coming straight out of film school and work the midnight shift, just programming stuff or orchestrating, and you work from 12 to 6 a.m. and you go, and then the composer arrives and all the grunt work's done. But you climb up those levels as you start to prove yourself. I think he gives them tasks and cues, and maybe kind of reharmonizing a cue or fixing a cue, existing cue for another scene. And if you do that well, then he rewards you. So there's a lot of composers that have come through the factory and worked with him and
still do, like Ben Wallfish is one of he's got and the people that are doing they're like composers that are unbelievable. Like it's not like it's Hans but it's an interesting way for a composer to kind of learn the craft, I think. Yeah,
there's a dark side to it, and I think I don't know, maybe I'm just playing poor me victim, but in some ways, with Hans's reputation and his ability to, in the old days, like John Williams could do 2 movies a year,
Right.
Hans Zimmer has his fingerprints or his factory working on 10, 15, 20, And so a lot of composers that are trying to step out of maybe B-list composers and trying to step up to that next level find that those opportunities, which, I mean, you get 1 composer or 2 composers on a movie. If Hans is taking like 20 of them, that's kind of 18 movies that like B-list to A-list composers may not be getting, because they're kind of going through the Hans filter.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right, yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of tough, I think, because he's so, it becomes like, because you're getting the jobs, you get all the jobs. It's kind of, it's this weird paradox, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And because you're busy, you're the one who's always busy. The ones who aren't busy can't get busy because they're not busy. And therefore they're not going to get busy because they're not busy. So why would you use them? My dad had a saying, like that place, O'Hannigan's, like nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded.
Yeah.
You think about that, right?
Yeah. That makes sense.
And it's kind of that's kind of what it is,
Yeah. Paul, I'm telling you, I'm eagerly waiting for your next project, because you are clearly meant out for this. Yeah, Paul. Well, thank you for this. I will send you a copy when it's all cut up and ready to go.
Enjoy your holiday. Thanks for having me.
You too. Thank you.